Here's your host, Dennis Rimmer.
And here we go. It's another version or edition of Talking Books and Writing and Stuff podcast, of course. And when we talk about books and writing and stuff, we mean just that. For instance, today, musician-singer Crystal Shawanda is with us. So, Crystal, thanks for taking some time from Tennessee to talk to us today.
Oh, thank you so much for squeezing me in. I appreciate it.
Okay. So let's go way back. You were born in Ontario, but I can't pronounce the name of the First Nation on Manitoulin Island, so maybe you can help me out there.
Yeah, for sure. I'm from the Weequampong Unceded First Nations on Manitoulin Island in Ontario, Canada.
All right. So how long, and now you're in Nashville, we'll get to that, but in your early life, did you have any early musical influences?
Yeah, definitely. I grew up in a house at a family that loved music. I'm sorry. And, it wasn't just one style or one genre. There was just good and bad music, so they listened to everything. So I was influenced by everyone from Hank Williams to Johnny Cash and Loretta Lynn and Patsy Cline to, my oldest brother. He listened to old blues music like Muddy Waters and B.B. King. And then my other brother listened to everything from AC/DC to Steve Earle to Black Sabbath, Ozzy Osbourne, that kind of stuff. So I had a lot of different influences. I loved Etta James and then I had local heroes. I grew up in a community that, there's a lot of musicians and there was always jamborees and variety nights going on. And, those are my first teachers, my first mentors. So, I was a forever student. I was always learning from everyone.
And I also understand you did a bit of acting in your very younger years.
Yes, I did. I used to be a part of a theater group called the Ojibwe Theater Group. I joined them when I was about 10 years old. And so I toured around when I was 10 and 11, right up until I was 12 years old, and worked on several different productions with them. And then, then I moved away for a while. Then I came back when I was about 19, and then I joined their production again and toured around with them again. So, yeah, I had some acting experience. It was a lot of fun, but I figured out that music was my forte and what I preferred.
And do you remember when you actually had your first performance as a singer that you got paid for?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I started getting paid to sing when I was 10 years old. I had a lot of support on Manitoulin Island from the local reservations, and also the local non-Indigenous community supported me a lot. And so when I first started getting paid was local galas right there on Manitoulin Island. Actually, one of the other reservations, the Chigging First Nations, they used to hire me for banquets and galas, and so, that's how I kind of got my start.
Well, that's good, and you kept on going from there, and you're still rolling strong. So I was just listening again to your early music, or all music, on the, the Spotify or the Amazon here. You Can Let Go, Daddy. That was a very good song. It should have probably done, in my mind, better than it did, but I guess you're quite happy with what happened with it?
Yeah, definitely. I was the first Indigenous artist and to go number one in Canada and in America, and I held that record for I think almost 20 years. No Canadian artist reached number one for I think 20 years after I released You Can Let Go, and then I think just about 3 years ago, a Canadian artist finally reached number one on the American chart. So yeah, I was definitely happy, and my album debuted at number 16 on the American Billboard Country Music Sales chart. And we had an amazing ride with that album and that release, and got to play the Grand Ole Opry a whole bunch of times, and played with my heroes and the biggest festivals in America and Canada. So it was a lot of fun. It was a great adventure.
Probably bigger than I thought. Tell me about being on the Grand Ole Opry.
Oh, the Grand Ole Opry was incredible, because I grew up, in a family that loved my parents listened to the Grand Ole Opry they would, gather around the radio, every time the Opry was on, and they didn't have a TV when they were kids. So, I grew up on those stories, and they just loved the Opry all the way in Nashville, Tennessee, and my grandpa would tell me stories about it. And so when I finally got to play there the first time, Loretta Lynn was actually playing there, and that was my mom's favorite singer. So I got to bring my parents with me, and my mom got to chat around and laugh around with Loretta Lynn, and I just stood there, like, just taking it all in, like, you know, because me and my mom and my dad, we dreamed this dream together when I was a little kid, and so to be able to give that to my mom, to stand there and see her laughing with her childhood hero, you know, it's just like, we did it, Mom, we did it, we got here, we did what we set out to do.
Wow, that's fantastic. So right from the start, was this your goal to be, I'll say, a Grand Ole Opry singer, or just a singer making your living as a singer-songwriter?
Yeah, for me, I think the ultimate goal was just to sing. You know, the first time I got up to sing, I was 6 years old, and I can remember reaching a funny part in the song and everybody laughing, and I remember I could feel everybody's happiness. And, you know, growing up as an Indigenous kid on a reservation, you know, right in the thick of intergenerational trauma and people trying to heal from that, I noticed it, like, wow, this is all I have to do to make people happy is sing. And I realized that music can be like medicine. So for me, my ultimate goal is just to be a singer, to be able to make a living out of it, to be able to make music that made people happy and help them through their hard days. You know, and all the other stuff was just bonus, and, you know, it's the cherry on top of the cake.
So you're in Nashville now. How'd you get to Nashville from Manitoulin Island?
Well, you know, I grew up, like I said, I grew up on those stories of Nashville, Tennessee. That's the home of country music. That's where they make country music, you know. Yep. And, you know, my family was very fascinated by it. And so my dad was actually a truck driver. So we started making trips down to Nashville when I was like 12 years old. Oh. And then I moved here the first time when I was 16 years old. I moved down here all by myself and started busking on the street corners, playing at honky tonks when they would let me, and the songwriting clubs, and then I moved back home for a couple years, but then I came back and made the move permanent. So I've been here now for about 23 years.
So did you have like green card and all that kind of stuff, or being Indigenous, can you move back and forth without any problem?
For my reservation where I'm from, we have dual citizenship, so we can live and work in both countries. Perfect. So that's kind of what I've done. I go back and forth. I have an amazing touring career in Canada, and I go home all the time.
Well, that's great. And like you said, it's like, 1,000 years ago, there were no borders. So groups moved back and forth, up and down. And so why should you have to now all of a sudden have to show a card to get back to where you probably came from 1,000 years ago anyway?
For sure, you know, we've always been nomads. We move with the seasons, and we move with the changing of the seasons, and, you know, where we need to go to get the food we need to get. And there's, you know, it's basically the same thing these days, but just, you know, except we're not chasing animals. We're chasing our paychecks.
Isn't everybody, even at my advanced years? You have a daughter, right? Tell us about her.
Yes, I do. We have she just turned 9 yesterday. She's 9 years old. Her name is Shawanda, and she has grown up. My husband is my guitar player, so our daughter has grown up in the studio, on the stage, and on the road, and so she's just always around music. When we're writing songs, she's right there, and she joins us in our show now live on stage, and she sings 2 songs by herself at every show.
Come on.
And she also sang the backgrounds on several of the songs on my new album, and she sang backgrounds on a few songs on the last album. So, you know, and actually right now we've been, the past few weeks, we've been working on recording some of her own music. So she's definitely an emerging artist to watch for.
So your husband's your guitar player. Where did you and how did you guys meet?
We actually met right here in Nashville, Tennessee. My husband is from Kentucky, and he's been in the music scene a long time. He played with everybody from, you know, Marlo Tackett to, you know, Billy Ray Cyrus to, you know, so many different old country artists. And we met playing at a place called Tootsie's Orchid Lounge. He was in the late night band, and I was in the early band, and and we just started playing music together. And from there, it bloomed into a relationship, and we got married. And so we've been married for 22 years now. And so he actually produces my albums and engineers and mixes them and plays all the guitars and sometimes the bass. Sometimes he'll even play the drums. So he's very multi-talented. So it's
no
definitely
kidding.
a family affair.
And he's definitely a Southern gentleman, I can tell from his Kentucky type, I'll call it an accent, and got that Southern charm. And yes, sir, and we'll call you right back. And thanks for calling, y'all, and have a good day. And I think it's wonderful. I've got to meet you guys one of these days if I ever get to the Nashville area. That'd be great. So let's go back a bit.
For sure. He's true Southerner.
Let's go back a bit. Gary Buck was influential in producing one of your earlier records. Now, that's a name from country music in Canada that goes back a long way.
Oh, that's awesome that you remember Gary Buck. Yeah, I recorded my first album with him when I was 12 years old, right here in Nashville, Tennessee. I got to, somebody referred me to him when I won a singing contest in Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario. And one of the guys running the contest said, we were asking him, because that's what we did. Every time we would perform somewhere, me and my dad were always asking questions, and that's what my dad would tell me. You have to ask questions. You have to meet people and ask them, how do I do this? How do I do that? How do I record an album in Nashville? Yep. And so a gentleman in Sault Ste. Marie named Dave Patterson said, well, I know a guy in Nashville. His name is Gary Buck, and so he helped us make the connection, and we came down to Nashville, and we recorded, and Gary did a very awesome production. He brought in some of the best musicians to work on my album. Like, we had Hargis Pig Robbins, the piano player, who played with all the legends. We had Leo Jackson. We had Rob Hijacos, who went on to play all that amazing stuff for Shania Twain later on. So, like, we had legendary players. Like, he did not... he did right by me when we hired him to produce. He let me have an amazing experience.
Did you record at Bradley's Barn?
No. We actually recorded at a place called Merritt Studios, and we recorded one of the studios we recorded at was right across the street from Curb Records. And I remember when I was actually going in to record, I actually saw Leanne Rimes coming out of the label. I was like, oh my God, that's Leanne Rimes!
Wow, that's wonderful. And like I say, I was listening to some of your music on the Magic Box that we all have, and you were playing New Orleans is Sinking. And I went, oh, do you have a connection to Tragically Hip, or you just like their songs?
Oh, I've just always been a forever fan. Ever since I was a kid, I grew up on Tragically Hip. And when I was a teenager and in my 20s, me and my friends, we would go bombing around on the back roads, and we'd have bonfires. And I remember that's what we would always crank up, some Tragically Hip. And every time New Orleans is Sinking came on, I remember I used to say, someday I'm going to record this song, but I'm going to do it like more bluesy. I'm going to bring out all those bluesy undertones. And so we finally did it. And so it's one of my favorite covers, and it's definitely a fan favorite whenever we're playing in Canada.
Okay, so you started out, we'll call it the country music scene. Now you've kind of gone to the, like you said, the blues area. What made you switch, or how did that come about?
It just happened really naturally. At the time that I made the switch, country music was changing, and it was getting more poppy, and they were starting to bring in the bro country, and it's just not, and it was almost like everybody at radio was like, this is what country music is now, and that's not what I grew up on, so, and nothing against it, it was great, but it's just not what I wanted to do. And so I just started writing songs that meant something to me, that were special to me, that I felt like singing. And then when I did that, I just, all of a sudden, I had all these songs, and they sounded like blues songs. And, I had just left the record label. I was with RCA Records, and I had just started my own label called New Sun Music. And so I said to my husband, isn't this why we started a label, so we could do anything we want to do? So we put out a blues record. And I said, we'll put out a blues album. We'll see how it goes. Then we'll come back to country music. But when we put out that blues record, it felt so good. Like, for me, singing as a vocalist, it felt like I was letting a bird out of a cage. And it felt like I could finally be myself, like I wasn't holding back. And because sometimes it felt like I was trying to fit my voice into this little box, and like, not like I was told by my producers on the label, don't, hide your rasp a little bit, not too much growling, don't hit too many high notes, hold back on the trills. It was like they were making me hide all this cool stuff I could do in my voice, and it always kind of made me sad. So here I was singing blues music, and I felt like I was born to sing the blues.
Well, you've got Church House Blues and Midnight Blues. Any other ones planned?
Yeah, well, this new album, Sing Pretty Blues, I was nominated for a Juno Award and 3 Canadian Blues Music Awards, and we're just moving forward, steady ahead. We've been in the studio working on a new blues album. I'm also working on a children's lullaby album with my daughter, and then I'm also been recording some of my older country songs in the language, in Anishinaabe language. So I've got all kinds of projects going on. I'm always into something.
No kidding. So is your stage act, is that, you've got your daughter and your husband involved? Do you have like torches going off and shining lights and explosions and things like that, or you just come out and sing?
No, I just come out and sing. I've done all that before, and it's a lot of fun, but, I sometimes find all that stuff to be a bit of a distraction. So our show is about, family vibes. We get people dancing. I tell some stories, and usually I make people cry a little bit, but then I get them dancing and laughing again. So our shows are very good, and people bring their kids, and usually we end up with a little, my daughter ends up with her own little fan group on the side of little kids who want to meet her. So it's a really great atmosphere. It's a very, to me, I think we have an inspiring show. At least that's what my fans tell me.
And you've won a lot of Juno Awards. Where do you keep them all?
Oh, well, I keep all my awards right in the living room on my mantle, and I keep some of them on another shelf. I used to keep them on a shelf in the music room, like on a back shelf, kind of hidden away. And one day my husband said, you know what? You have worked your whole life, and you've made a lifetime of sacrifices, moving away from home when you were a little kid, playing on the streets for tips when you were still just a kid. He's like, those awards should be out here on display on the living room to remind you every day that, it was all for something, that you did it. You made all your dreams come true and then some. And then I was like, yeah, you're right. Let's do that.
Right. That's right. Why have them if you're not going to put them on display? I have a few broadcasting awards, but they're not. I've got one on display here in the office, I call it, so that's fine. What do you have a home recording studio? I guess is what I was going to ask.
We do. We have our own studio. We work in a lot of the big studios here in Nashville, but we've built our studio and our home up so good that I've gone to the point where I prefer to record in our studio, and I would actually match our vocal chain up to any vocal chain in Nashville studio. It is so good. My husband has tailored our studio and the vocal chain to the way I like to sing and the way what sounds great with my voice. And so, this last album, we went to all these big fancy studios to record, and I sat there listening. I'm like, I don't like my vocals. Let's redo all of them here at home. So we did that, and I'm like, oh, yeah, much better.
Oh, that's great. Okay, like you said earlier, you asked when you were a kid, and your dad said, go ask people questions. What advice now do you give kids or people when they ask you questions? Do you have some sort of standard replies?
Yeah, for sure. The greatest advice I can give is, as cliche as it sounds, is to just follow your heart. Be yourself, because everybody else is already taken. And then sorry about that. And also to be teachable. Let people teach you. You don't know everything. The more you let people teach you, the more knowledgeable you get. And finally, never give up.
Never give up. Keep on keeping on. Crystal Shawanda.
That's right.
It's been one more question. What's your favorite sandwich?
My favorite sandwich is the turkey avocado sandwiches that my husband makes for me.
There you go. Crystal Shawanda, music maker, mother, husband, artist, musician, and devotee of the turkey avocado sandwich. So good luck to you and yours, and nice meeting you, nice talking to you, nice talking to your hubby over there, and continued good luck, and thanks for being with us.
Thank you so much. I appreciate all your support. Thanks for squeezing me in.
Hope you enjoyed this episode of Talking Books and Stuff with Dennis Rimmer. You can find Talking Books and Stuff anywhere you get your podcasts. Over 300 episodes await you.